Welcome to the first ever bracket challenge in Strictly Hockey Talk history. We're new to YouTube, so bear with me if it doesn't, come out as perfectly as you guys expect. But third ever video on YouTube. I'm gonna give you guys my predictions for the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2026. A lot of interesting matchups in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. We have three Canadian teams involved in this Stanley Cup playoffs, and also Sid the Kid. Well, I don't know if he's a kid anymore, but Sidney Crosby is back in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he's going up against my boy Rick Tocchet. So, yeah, I'm excited to just give you guys my thoughts, my thinking process, in who I believe is going to be lifting the Stanley Cup by the end of the playoffs. And yeah, it will not be the Vancouver Canucks. Let's be honest. Hopefully they win the lottery, but Stanley Cup is probably not going to happen in my lifetime. But who knows? Anything could happen. Let's get going. We'll start with the Western Conference and make our way, throughout. We'll go through it round by round here, and I feel like, there's probably like four or five teams I think that could win the Stanley Cup. And I'll go through my thought process in each round and why I believe this team is going to go as far as they are. But, at the end of the day, the Stanley Cup playoffs is honestly, obviously the hardest trophy to win in sports, the Stanley Cup is. And, sometimes teams go on some miracle runs, and they don't end up lifting the cup at the end, but they go very far. Some teams, like the bubble year Montreal Canadiens, they're on the Western Conference side, and they beat some teams that you didn't expect them to beat, like the Leafs and the Vegas Golden Knights along the way. They ended up falling short to the team that they're playing in the first round this season, the Tampa Bay Lightning, but they went on a miracle run. We've seen a lot of miracle runs throughout our times. The Edmonton Oilers back in 2006, if I believe, if I'm correct, was Chris Pronger, and those guys were 8 seed, if I'm not mistaken, and they went all the way to the Cup final and lost in Game 7. So, yeah, it's possible that a lower seeded team like the Kings, who've done it before in the past, everyone remembers 2012, are capable of possibly going on a miracle run, but ultimately, usually the top 5 teams prevail at the very end. So let's start this process here. I'm going to start with the Colorado Avalanche and the LA Kings matchup, and I think this is a pretty straightforward pick. I know I just said the LA Kings could go on this miracle run, and who knows what can happen, but the Colorado Avalanche have been a juggernaut all fucking year. And I truly do believe that, this team has got a bad taste in its mouth after, what happened last year in the playoffs. They basically had the game and the series in Game 7, but, Mikko Rantanen goes on this, 6-7 minute heater that pretty much took the series away from the Avs. And it was, extra, it was tough. It was extra humiliating for the Avalanche, considering they traded Mikko Rantanen that season and they had to play him in the first round, and Mikko Rantanen did what he did versus the Avs last year. So, anything is possible, obviously, but I do think the Colorado Avalanche is going to get this done, and I do believe they'll probably win this series in 4 or 5 games. We'll ultimately see in the end how many games it takes, but I think 4 or 5 games for the Avs makes a ton of sense. They've been a dominant team all year. Their goaltending's been solid with Wedgwood. McKinnon's been on a tear. I love Martin Necas as a Mikko Rantanen replacement. The speed that those two can come at you with, and with Cale Makar, it's something to marvel at times. And I really do believe that the Colorado Avalanche are one of the best teams in the league, and they've proven it all year. And let's see what they do in the playoffs against the LA Kings in round 1. I believe they'll win in 4 or 5 games. Let's move on to the Minnesota Wild and the Dallas Stars. This is one of the toughest series to predict. And My heart says Dallas. My mind says Minnesota. My heart says Dallas because I don't want to see Quinn Hughes win. Like, what happened with the Canucks this year was one of the most disappointing moments in my fandom's history. Losing a player like Quinn Hughes because he didn't want to be here, hurts it hurts your fandom a little bit, and you don't want to cheer for that guy ever again. So, I know that I shouldn't be making emotional decisions here, but this series is a pick 'em, right? Like, this series could go either way. I don't think there's a wrong pick here. Like, I could see it going either way. I could see the Minnesota Wild winning this series, or I could see the Dallas Stars winning this series. I think it's going to be a 7-gamer. I think the Dallas Stars have more depth up front. I think Minnesota's got the higher end talent, but Dallas has the better depth up front. I also believe that Jake Ottinger's numbers against the Minnesota Wild are ridiculous. And if that continues, that's going to, be pretty good for the Dallas Stars in this series. So for that reason alone, I'm going to go with the Dallas Stars. And, you can make the argument that the Minnesota Wild have the better goaltending if you just compare the seasons this year. But, when you look at the numbers, and sometimes the numbers, they don't lie. And the trend is your friend. And I believe that if Jake Ottinger is posting a .920 save percentage against a certain team, he probably just has their number. And he's probably going to play lights out, and the Dallas Stars are going to win this series in 7 games. Like I said, my mind said Minnesota, and my heart said Dallas. I'm going with my heart here. I think this series is a pick 'em, and I'm going to go with my heart here and take the Dallas Stars. Let's move on. We have now the Vegas Golden Knights going up against the Utah Mammoth. And again, Vegas, firing Bruce Cassidy and getting that coach's bump was needed. Like, this team was floundering down the stretch, and a coaching change was needed for that team. They didn't feel like they really paid much attention to what the old coach was saying, and it felt like change was needed, and it's proven that it's worked with Torts. And I don't know how long Torts is going to be here with the Vegas Golden Knights, but what they've done down the stretch, not losing a game in regulation, is pretty impressive, and I think that's going to continue here. With Torts and the Vegas Golden Knights. They have talent with Eichel and Marner and Dorofeev and Mark Stone. And if Mark Stone's healthy, like, he's always one of the best two-way wingers in the league. The defense is older a little bit, for sure. But, at the end of the day, the Vegas Golden Knights have that experience. The goaltending has been a question mark for the Golden Knights this year. But Carter Hart under Torts seems to find success. He had success with him in Philly, and it seems like he's starting to find that success here with Torts in Vegas. So I'm leaning Vegas, but the Utah Mammoth, they're a fun team to watch. They get offense from a lot of young players on their team. Logan Cooley, Dylan Guenther, Clayton Keller's a veteran out there, and he's putting up points. Nick Schmaltz is a solid player. Their defense is very underrated with Sergachev, Nate Schmidt, and they got my boy Ian Cole there, and they added Mackenzie Weegar. They've gotten consistent goaltending from Vejmelka and Vanacek, if I'm not mistaken. Like, this is going to be a fun series, and I don't know if I want to take Vegas in 6 or take them in 7. I think I'm going to take them in 6. I believe that Vegas has the higher end talent in this series. And with the new coaching change, the coach's bump will continue. And I believe that Vegas will move on versus the Utah Mammoth. next series up here, the Edmonton Oilers versus the Anaheim Ducks, and one of the Canadian teams, in the only Canadian team in the Western Conference, but one of the Canadian teams that are remaining in the playoffs, and the team that's gone to 2 straight Cup Finals, the team that has the best player in the world, Connor McDavid. Like, no Florida this year. The pathway is a lot easier through the Pacific than it is through the Central, right? It feels like, and I don't want to be disrespectful to a team, but it feels like this matchup for the Oilers is a blessing in disguise. The Oilers should be able to win this series in like 5 games, I think. The Ducks, they're up and coming team. Like, no doubt about it. They're going to be a young, fun, high flying team in the future. But their time isn't now. The Oilers' time is now. The clock is ticking on Connor McDavid's tenure in Edmonton. And I'm sure he wants to bring that Stanley Cup back home to Canada and Edmonton. And this might be one of those years where, it could be an opportunity lost, or, it could be a blessing, right? I do believe the Edmonton Oilers get this series done in 5 games. I think there are, I do believe that they are, one of the best teams in the Western Conference. Even though they didn't win the Pacific Division, I do believe that their high-end talent with McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, and now their young players like Savoy and Podkolzin stepping up for them, and Nugent Hopkins, still being that savvy vet, and Zach Hyman scoring goals in the blue paint. Like, that's a team that, I think is ready to go on another long run. Goaltending has always been the question mark with Edmonton, but I sort of like Connor Ingram. I don't know what it is with Connor Ingram. I actually like the way he goals, the way he plays goalie. He finds, it feels like his positioning is solid, and he just seems like a more calming presence than the guy that they had the last couple of Stanley Cup playoffs, and Stuart Skinner. Doesn't seem to get rattled at times, and I feel like, the expectation was for the Oilers that Tristan Jarry was going to be their guy. It hasn't worked out, but luckily they had a plan for Ingram to, come in, play in the AHL, see how he did in the AHL, and slowly find his game in the NHL now, and it feels like it's worked. And we're going to see very soon if, they made a great call on bringing Ingram into their organization. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the Eastern Conference here. Let's start with the Buffalo Sabres and the Boston Bruins. It's a tough series. So, Buffalo, congrats. You're finally in the Stanley Cup playoffs since 2011. 2011 feels so long ago. Trust me. As a Canuck fan, 2011 feels like it was 100 years ago. But congrats to Buffalo Sabres fans. Congrats to the Buffalo Sabres organization. You have finally made the Stanley Cup playoffs since 2011. And your prize is you get to play against the Boston Bruins. I don't know if that's a prize. I don't know if that's, a nightmare. But we'll see how this series goes. I do believe that Buffalo's got the higher end talent. But Boston has the experience of playing those big games in the past. Was Pasternak, McAvoy, Zacha. Lindholm's got a ton of playoff experience. Zadorov is there as well, right? Like, I know what Zadorov can do in the playoffs, trust me. It's going to be a fun series. It's going to be a fun series, especially seeing the crowd in Buffalo and Boston go at it. Like, Boston crowds are insane. And I don't even know what the Buffalo crowd's going to be like because it's been so long since we've seen them in the playoffs. Like, I'm anticipating it's going to be incredible. It's going to be like theater, but who knows? Like, this can be a hell of a series. I think there's going to be a lot of hits. A lot of hits in this series. The crowd's going to be nuts. Um, you know what? Like, this is a tough series to predict. I think I'm going to go Buffalo, but it's not going to be a, 4-game series or anything. I think Buffalo's going to, win in 7 games. I think that home ice advantage in Game 7 is gonna be huge, and I think Buffalo will win this series in 7 games. That's what I think, and they've been good all year. They've been consistent all year. I'm hoping that translates or transitions into the playoffs. Let's move on to the next series. This is probably my favorite series in the playoffs, and in my opinion, the hardest series to predict. Um, the bookmakers, the Bet365 or whatever book you guys use, has Montreal as a 2-1 underdog against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I just don't know why. Like, why are the Montreal Canadiens plus 200 versus the Tampa Bay Lightning? I get it. Tampa Bay has arguably the best player in the league, Nikita Kucherov, who's been unbelievable all year. They have one of the best goalies in the league in Andres Vasilevsky, and they have some other guys like Sorelli and Hagel and Point, and uh, you know, they got some nice pieces there, and they've won Stanley Cups in the past with John Cooper, and the one thing I will say that they're missing, and I think is going to be a huge reason why you know this series is going to be a lot tougher for them than people expect, and that is that Victor Hedman is not going to be available for this series. Also, even if he is available in this series, Victor Hedman has not been Victor Hedman of old. Victor Hedman is one of the best defensemen of our generation, but he's old. He's got a lot of miles on his body, and I just don't believe, even if he played in this series, he would be an impact player. And I think they're going to be missing that level of impact player that they had in the past that helped them win Stanley Cups in the past in this series. Um, on the Montreal side of things, Montreal's young talent is incredible. It's it's the making of something special, in my opinion. What they've done in Montreal is it's something that I want my Canucks to follow. I want my Canucks to do what Montreal Canadiens have done in the last 5 years. And with the talent that they have with Suzuki, Caulfield, Sofkovsky, Demidov, Lane Hudson, the young goaltenders that they have in their system. Their defense was Dobson as well, who might not be available to start the series, but I think sometime in the series he will come back. That's a team that can go toe to toe with anyone. That's a team that can go on a deep run. And it's unfortunate they have to go up against the 2-time Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning. But, I'm not doubting them. I honestly am not going to doubt them in this series. Um, I think Montreal might win this series in 7 games. And the reason I say that is I just believe that their higher end talent is better than the Tampa Bay Lightning's higher end talent. Yes, they have the best player in the series in Nikita Kucherov, but I feel like every other player after Kucherov, I would take on the Montreal side. I would take Suzuki over Hagel. I would take Caulfield over Hagel. Sorry, I almost choked there. I would take Lane Hudson over any defenseman on the Tampa Bay Lightning. The only player I would take on Tampa after Kucherov on the Tampa Bay side is Andres Vasilevsky. But even Andres Vasilevsky, and I know this might be a hot take, I don't believe he's the old Andres Vasilevsky. He's not the goalie that was winning Conn Smythe trophies back in the day. He's a good goalie still. He's still a top 3 goalie in the league, in my opinion. But he's not the same old Andres Vasilevsky that stole you a series. You know what I mean? That shut it down in elimination games. I don't even know what that stat is, but I remember he had this incredible save percentage in elimination games. And I just don't believe he's got that capability anymore because the goaltending position is tough. It's hard. It's hard to keep that consistency for as long as Andres Vasilevsky has. I'm taking the Montreal Canadiens in 7 games. And trust me, I do not want to take the Montreal Canadiens in 7 games. But my brain is telling me take the Montreal Canadiens in 7 games, and we're getting them at plus 200. Like, I'm taking the Montreal Canadiens. I'm taking youth. I'm taking youth over, some of these veteran teams. And, obviously there are some veteran teams that I'm taking over youth, like Edmonton over Anaheim and Vegas over, the Mammoth. But I still believe that those teams have more left in the tank than the Tampa Bay Lightning do. And that's why I'm going to take the Montreal Canadiens. Let's move on to the next series. Carolina versus the Ottawa Senators. Yeah, that's going to be a tough series as well. But I do believe that this is Carolina's year. I do believe that there's no Florida anymore. Ottawa's had an underrated season. I know people will talk about how, there's an 8 seed. But the reality is the goaltending was so bad for the Ottawa Senators to start the year that, it affected where they finished in the standings. If they had average goaltending, they'd probably have 10 to 15 more points. And they wouldn't be a team that's 8 seeded in the playoffs. They might be even one of the top 2 seeds, believe it or not. The reality is goaltending is going to be a question mark going into this series for both sides. And you can make the argument Tim Stützle is the best player in this series. But I just believe the Carolina Hurricanes' depth, what the experience that they have in the Stanley Cup playoffs, what they've had to endure the last 3-4 years going up against Florida's and not getting the job done, I think it's their time. I think it's their time to get it done. And I believe that the Carolina Hurricanes are going to win this series in 6 games. By the way, the Montreal-Tampa Bay series is going 7. Like, no doubt in my mind that series is going 7. So I got Carolina in 6. I got Montreal in 7. I got Buffalo in 7. I've got Edmonton in 5. I've got Vegas in 6. I've got Dallas in 7. And I have Colorado in 4. I think Colorado's going to sweep the LA Kings. Let's move on to the last series in the Eastern Conference here. Philadelphia versus Pittsburgh. I'm wearing the Pittsburgh Penguins jersey. And I love Sid. He's like my favorite player growing up. Like I've seen this guy just be like in front of my eyes, be one of the best players in the history of the game. He's getting old though. And I do love what Philadelphia has done down the stretch here under Rick Tocchet. I like the youth of Zegras and Tippett and Michkov and Porter Martone, who's jumped in and made an impact for them. Vladar's provided him goaltending, but a lot of that is just because Rick Tocchet coaches a style where it favors the goaltending wherever he goes. Their defense has some holes for sure. I do believe, though, that Sid and Gino and Letang and Carlson, like, they're old. They're great players still, especially Sid. But I just believe that when you're at this point of the Stanley Cup playoffs, youth is are hungrier. Youth are, they're built to go further, built to play more games. I just believe that the Philadelphia Flyers are going to be a great upset here in this series. Pittsburgh's had a great year. Don't get me wrong. Like props to what Kyle Dubas has done in Pittsburgh and what Dan Muse has done in Pittsburgh and what Crosby has done in Pittsburgh. I just believe everywhere else in the lineup, other than like a guy like Ben Kindle and Chinnikov, they're very old. Gino's like what, 35, 36. Sid's like 37, 38. Letang is, I don't even know how Letang's still playing. Erik Karlsson sort of had a re-emergent season this year. He's played well, but I don't believe it's going to be sustainable in the playoffs. I do think Philadelphia wins this series in 6 games. I know I might be a little bit biased because I'm a Tocchet guy, but I'm also a Sid guy. I'm literally wearing his jersey. How can I go up against my guy? But, Sid's won enough cups. He's won 3 cups. You know what I mean? He's got 2 gold medals. This series will not define his legacy. These kids in Philly are hungry. They wanna win for the city. The city is electric right now in Philadelphia, and I really do believe that they've got this momentum going into the playoffs. They're playing good hockey right now, and I think it'll continue in this matchup. I think Philadelphia is going to win this series in 6 games. Okay, so yeah, so this is asking me how many games each series will end in, and I sort of gave my prediction here. I'll give it right now again. So I'll go Buffalo in 7. I'll go Montreal in 7. I'll go Carolina in 6, and I'll go Philly in 6 next. I did not do this for the Western Conference, so I want to make sure I got the Western Conference figured out here. Okay, let's do this again. Western Conference, I got Colorado in 4. I have Dallas in 7. I have Vegas in 6, and I have Edmonton in 5. Okay, let's move on. I'll try to make this part of the bracket a lot faster because I've broken down every team in the first round, and now we just let's go through this a little bit faster here. Colorado, Dallas. I think this is revenge for Colorado. I think Colorado is not happy about what happened last year, and I think they'll get their revenge here. I think Colorado's going to win this series probably in 6 games. They dominated that series. I remember that series still. Colorado deserved to win that series in less games, deserved to win that game 7. But, sometimes hockey's a funny game. Things go against you at times. Puck bounces a different way here or there. The goaltending isn't as sharp as it is on the other side. I think Colorado this year is built differently. I think Colorado's going to win this series in 6 games. Vegas and Edmonton. This is a tougher series to predict than most people might think. Edmonton, I think, beat Vegas in 5 games last year. Vegas has added a Mitch Marner, who, in my opinion, is obviously not a great playoff performer, but is still a really good hockey player. And without the pressure of being in a Toronto Maple Leafs uniform, who knows how he performs. But I think it'll be a lot less pressure on Mitch in this series. I do believe that the Vegas Golden Knights have holes on the back end, more holes on the back end than the Edmonton Oilers do, believe it or not. And I think that'll be the difference in this series. I think Edmonton's going to win this series in 6 games. I believe that Edmonton's higher end talent with Draisaitl, McDavid, and Bouchard are just going to be too much for the Vegas Golden Knights. And I believe that the Edmonton Oilers are going to get this series done in 6 games. Let's do this. I don't know why it's not asking me for the games. I did not want to do that. We'll figure that out later. My pick is not Colorado, by the way. Let's move on to the. I don't want to fucking pick. What the hell's going on here? Can I not put this? Whatever. I'll figure this out later. We'll see what happens here. We don't know who's going to win the Stanley Cup yet. But let's move on to the Eastern Conference. Buffalo and Montreal, 2 young teams going at it. Buffalo's had the better year this regular season, but slightly. They have some studs too. Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin, in my opinion, should win the Norris Trophy. And it's a tough series to predict. I think I'm gonna go Montreal. I just believe that Montreal, again, they have better younger talent. Demidov, Slavkovsky are just monsters, and Lane Hudson's a stud, and Noah Dobson, and I just believe that their team is built for the long run here, and I'm going to take Montreal to move on in that series. I think I'll take Montreal in 7. By the way, that is 2 Game 7s for Montreal, by the way. I've predicted. Carolina, Philadelphia. I think this is where, Tockett's, magic in Philly ends. I just believe that Carolina's a better team, more talent. And, at the end of the day, the Philadelphia Flyers have accomplished more than anybody expected them to accomplish. So I think I'm taking Carolina in 5 games here. And let's predict this conference final here. These are the 4 teams that I have going to the conference finals. And, like, would anybody be surprised to see 2 Canadian teams in the conference finals? I think most people might, but there's no bias here. I don't really care for a Canadian team to win the cup. I really don't. Um, you know, I've never seen it in my lifetime, but I really don't care if a Canadian team wins the cup. I'm not that biased. I'm a Canucks fan. I want the Canucks to win the cup before any Canadian team lifts the cup. But let's break down these 4 teams here. Colorado and Edmonton, the 2 best players in the league going head to head. No disrespect to Nikita Kucherov. You got 2 of the best defensemen going head to head as well, and Evan Bouchard, who gets no credit, I feel like, in the media, and you got Cale Makar on the other side in Colorado. That's going to be a fast series. A few years ago they met, and Colorado mopped the floor with them. They swept them in 4 games, but some of those games were real close. Colorado, they're not as stacked as they were that year they won the cup and beat Edmonton in 4 games, but they have similar pieces. No Rantanen, obviously, but they replaced him with Natchez. The goaltending is obviously a lot different. The defense is still built around Cale Makar and Devon Toews. And then in Edmonton, they still have McDavid and Draisaitl. But the difference is Evan Bouchard was a baby at that time. They didn't have the higher end talent on the back end like they do now with Evan Bouchard being older. I also like Edmonton's youth with Savoy and Podkolzin now, and like I said earlier, their bottom 6 has guys that can play the role of being a penalty killer. Adding a guy like Connor Murphy, I think, was a solid add for the Edmonton Oilers. I think I'm going to take the Edmonton Oilers here in 7 games. That's the first time any of these 2 teams play in 7 games, and I think it will be in the conference finals. I think the Edmonton's going to win this series in 7 games. I think it's McDavid's time to get one over Nate, and I do believe McDavid's a better player. I do believe that McDavid ultimately will get his team back to the 3rd straight Stanley Cup final. That's what great players do, and that's what I expect he will do. Let's move on to the Eastern Conference here. The Carolina Hurricanes versus the Montreal Canadiens. This is another tough series to predict. Like I said, I love the way Montreal plays. With their youth, they have a 50-goal scorer in Caulfield. Lane Hudson he's like, Quinn Hughes 2.0. Suzuki, the 100-point center. And then you have Carolina who don't have a 100-point guy in their team, but they have studs up and down the lineup. And, maybe it's Rod Brind'Amour's style of play that limits offense in this system, but they have studs on their 3rd line that a lot of people haven't even heard of, but I think will be household names after this Stanley Cup playoffs. A guy like Jackson Blake, who I believe is an up-and-coming star in this league. 53 points this year in 80 games. May not sound incredible for a 22-year-old, but when you watch this kid play, he pops. He pops like not many players in this league do, especially at his age. And his hands and his speed and his hockey IQ is something to marvel at times. And this guy's a 4th-round pick. I almost feel like if the Carolina Hurricanes end up winning the Stanley Cup, he's a very good sprinkle. And I'm not saying, put a ton of money on this, but a sprinkle, a little bit of money on Jackson Blake to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. I do believe the Carolina Hurricanes are a team. They're built 4 lines to do damage on each and every one of those lines, and anybody can dominate time to time and put up points. And I believe that Jackson Blake, who gets power play time, who plays on the 3rd line, if I'm not mistaken, is capable of doing that for the Hurricanes. That's how deep they are. And I think that's going to be the difference. I think the Montreal Canadiens and the Carolina Hurricanes series probably ends in 5 games. I think the Carolina Hurricanes are going to win in 5. So, we're at the final boss. We have the 2006 rematch between the Edmonton Oilers and the Carolina Hurricanes. And I honestly do not know where I'm going to go. I've gone back and forth with these two teams. I've done the bracket challenges in my WhatsApp group chats that we have our own pools or whatever, and I've switched up a few times with my final pick. I've been saying I'm going to take the Carolina Hurricanes. Even a few months back, I said the Edmonton Oilers might get it done against the Carolina Hurricanes. And I feel even differently about it than I did yesterday than I do today or tonight, because I'm recording this at like 12:30 a.m., believe it or not. I do believe that Edmonton has a higher end talent with McDavid and Draisaitl and Bouchard. But like I said, the Carolina Hurricanes are built 4 lines deep, and they just come at you in waves. The goaltending is, I think, a wash in this series. I'd give the edge to the Hurricanes on the back end. But again, I would probably give the edge to the Oilers up front. I think I'm going to have to bet on greatness here. I think as much as I think the Carolina Hurricanes are good enough to win the Stanley Cup, and I think they're built 4 lines deep and they come at you in waves and they're better on the back end, great players just get it done in great time, like in great moments. The Florida Panthers are no longer here. You know what I mean? I think the Edmonton goaltending has been as steady as it's ever been, and yeah, I know it's crazy of me to even say that without even watching him play a playoff game, Ingram play a playoff game, but I truly do believe it. I just believe that this guy is just more composed, and he's not in his head, and I just believe that he's going to be a steady part of the Edmonton Oilers this upcoming playoffs. His positioning just looks right to me when I watch, but I don't know anything about goaltending, if I'm being completely honest. But I will say I do know something about how great Connor McDavid is. He is 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals. He's capable of doing it. And I do believe that this is the year that he gets it done. He's one of the best players to ever touch the ice in the NHL. It's his time. I really do believe it's his time. And I know that everyone shits on him for not winning Olympic gold in February, but team game ultimately. And I do believe the Edmonton Oilers are a better version of the team last year. And maybe not as great as the team that lost to Florida a couple years ago in the Game 7 when they came back from 3-0. But they're not going up against Florida. I think this version of the Oilers is better than the last year's version of the Oilers. And they have youth from guys like Savoy and Podkolzin. I'll continuously keep saying that. I really do think that Savoy is going to be a difference maker alongside McDavid and Hyman. And then you have Draisaitl with Podkolzin and Roslovic. You got Dickinson killing penalties for the Oilers on the third line, and Evan Bouchard is one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. I feel like I think this is their year, and who knows? Maybe they get bounced in in the second round by Vegas. Who knows? But I do believe that great players will always do great things. And I believe Connor McDavid is on his way to doing that. I really do. He'll get the job done this time, I believe. And I'm taking the Oilers in 7. I think this is a 7-game series, and it's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be unbelievable. The rematch of the 2006 Stanley Cup playoffs, the rematch, 20 years later, we got the Oilers and the Hurricanes again. This is a storybook ending for the Oilers fans. And the Cup is coming back to Canada, in my opinion. I just believe it. So I got to predict the total number of goals in this Stanley Cup Finals. I'm going to predict 43. And no rhyme or reason. I just believe That's a decent number. I don't know if you divide 43 by 7. What do we get here? No, 6.1, right? That's not bad. I could see six goals in a 7-game series. So yeah, 43 is the number. It didn't ask for the games, the number of games in the other rounds, which is odd, but I guess that's the bracket here. Thank you for joining me. Joining me, seeing me, watching me do the NHL bracket challenge here in 2026. Just trying to put as much content as possible on the Strictly Hockey Talk YouTube channel. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Press the subscribe button. Follow on X and on Apple and Spotify for more content. We'll have a podcast out for you guys next week with Nick, Brian, and KD. And we'll talk more about the Stanley Cup playoffs then. But, as of now, we'll end this video.